So moving on then, we've been looking at the nature of Satan, his personality, the fact that he is a personality. We looked at proper names of Satan. There are only a few of those. We're going to get then into titles of Satan tonight. And the first title is an interesting one because it actually is the title that spawned a presumed proper name that's not really a proper name, and that is Lucifer. But day star, son of the morning. Isaiah 14, we've already looked at how you've fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You've been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. So day star is the word Halel, which means day star. It's just that simple. But it is actually coupled in the Hebrew with also the idea of the dawn, the day star, son of dawn. And it is son of dawn, just like that literally. And this is the only time in the Old Testament that phrase is used. What's interesting is, in English, day star comes across a couple of times in the New Testament. And it's not about Satan. It's about Christ. Christ is the day star in the New Testament. It's a different underlying term. It's a Greek term, and it's not the same Greek term that correlates to Eliel, but it is still day star in its translation. But here it's referring to Satan. And what makes that interesting is this is the idea, this is a name that was given to Satan before. How you've fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. He's talking about what he fell from, you who once laid low the nations. And so this term is a good term. It's a term that is a positive term. It's not like, Beelzebub or any of the other terms that imply some of the other prince of the world, all the things you would think to say. This was a term that referenced his nature pre-fall. He was light, he was good. Light in Scripture, when it is used symbolically, has one of two usages pretty much universally. It is either light in the sense of righteousness, or it is light in the sense of revelation, light in the sense of the light bulb going off over someone's head in the cartoon, in the sense of knowledge. You've been given light, Jesus said, in Matthew 12, but they've not. So, day star here is a positive name. That was something he was called before. So, Lucifer is actually a product of Halel. We think of Lucifer as a proper name, and people refer to Lucifer, and we know who Lucifer is. Everybody understands who Lucifer is. But Lucifer comes from one place, right here, Isaiah 14, and one translation, which wasn't even the King James. It was the Latin. The Latin translated Halel as Lucifer, and King James held on to that, and of course, you know the rest of the story. So modern usage still refers to Satan as Lucifer, but strictly, biblically speaking, this isn't really a good name, because it's not a name that really comes from translation. It's a name that comes from not a Hebrew term, but a Latin term coming from a Hebrew term. And now an English term coming from a Latin term coming from a Hebrew term. Now that's how language works, so it's not improper that the word is used, but if we're trying to be accurate, if you're reading Latin, Lucifer's good. If you're not, which nobody does, day star is the most strict translation of what Halel says. But it emphasizes again Satan as one who shines. By the way, that name is a name that is used in the ancient world to refer to Venus. Venus is the morning star. It gets brighter toward morning, toward dawn, as I understand it. I don't know that I've ever seen or noticed that, but that's the rumor. And so it was a term that would naturally be known of Venus as the star. Of course, it's a planet, but it's shiny, so they thought it was a star. Next name is Prince of the World, Prince of this world. We see that in John 12:31. It's time for judgment on this world. Now the prince of this world will be driven out. We see it in John 14. I'll not speak with you much longer, for the prince of this world is coming. When we talk about the prince of the world, the word world is cosmos. Cosmos is a tricky word, Because in a sense, it means the whole created order. In a sense, it means the world. In a sense, it means the tangible created world, order or world. In a sense, it doesn't mean that at all. Depends on how it's used. That's the way language is. Language has context, and context brings meaning to the word. We do that in English a lot. We just know the rules, and it doesn't trouble us. It troubles us when we're looking at it in the Scripture. But the word world in English does the same thing cosmos does. We talk about worldliness. That was a big word when I was a kid growing up. We were in church. That's kind of worldly, don't you think, sir? That's a way of saying, you're not acting like Jesus acts. You're being worldly over there. You're being sinful. And we just don't really use that much anymore. But that's the connotation. So the prince of this world is literally the prince of the cosmos. Well, let's think about that for a second. Is Satan the prince of the created order? The universe? Well, no. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So when it talks about him as the prince of the world, now Satan in the temptation of Christ did say, this has all been given to me and I give it to whoever I want, but he's also a liar. And he says stuff like that, and he's talking to Jesus. If you don't lie to anybody, lie to Jesus. But nevertheless, the idea of the prince of the world, I think, has more to do with his worldly program in the cosmos than the cosmos itself. He's the king. We know who the king of the material cosmos is, and Satan doesn't know it. He's going to learn fast enough because the end is coming. And it's Christ who's going to be king of the cosmos. He's the one that's going to open the abyss and throw Satan in it. He's the one that's going to open the lake of fire and throw Satan in it. So we know who the king of the actual created order is. But Satan carries out this ministry on the earth, the fallen structures of the earth. Those are his to bend to his will. Those are his to tempt people through. And when we talk about him being prince of the world, we need to think of it that way. And that, by the way, connects right into the next one, which is prince of the power of the air, Ephesians. Ephesians 2, I refer to a lot. You were dead in your transgressions and sins, in which you used to live, when you followed the ways of this cosmos, world. So that's how the word is used. And the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit now at work in those who are disobedient. So all of those are saying the same thing. You, when you were lost, followed the ways of the world. Well, it is still the cosmos, but it's referring to the systems of the world, not the created order of the world. We don't follow the way of atoms and electrons. We follow the way of people and systems and thought, the processes of that world in its fallen state. And so that's how we need to understand Satan as the prince of the world. And here, taking that same idea, following the ways of the world, equates to you being following of the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit now at work in those who are disobedient. So we still have the cosmos there, the sinful nature of the world, and now we see him as the ruler of the kingdom of the air. That emphasizes Satan being the prince among the demonic kingdom. We have elsewhere in Ephesians the idea of we don't fight against flesh and blood, we fight against powers, principalities, and rulers in the high places. Satan and his demons traverse the skies. They are here and about. They move about. And the idea of prince of the power of the air is sort of that. Of course, it is him being the prince of those powers that are in the air. And he is the prince of people who are lost as well, because who can resist him outside of the strength of Christ? That's the point of Ephesians 2. You, outside of Christ, are at his mercy. And so he gets to rule over people as well, and he does, until Christ countermands that. But the real term is emphasizing him being the leader of the demonic kingdom, those who followed him and are on the earth about doing his work. So he is the spirit now at work in those who are disobedient. Not just the demons, that does include the humans, but the idea of the prince of the ruler of the kingdom of the air is the idea of him being the ruler of those other demons. But he is also at work in those who are disobedient, the lost. That's the whole point of Ephesians 2. So prince of the power of the air. Thirdly is the god of this age. Age is another word that we have to consider. Important word. It's a fluid word. 2 Corinthians 4 says, the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Let me make a commentary on that verse real quick. Because I've heard people preach that text and say the devil has blinded the minds of unbelievers so they can't hear the gospel. So it's impossible for them to be saved. No. He has blinded their minds. They cannot hear the gospel, but nothing is impossible for God. And when God delivers the gospel, he delivers the gospel. When the Lord lets somebody hear the gospel, they hear the gospel. Satan can't thwart that. The idea that is that in natural man, he can blind. And that's what we live in. We are getting farther and farther away from an American culture that embraces Judeo-Christian formatting of any design. Nowadays, when I was a kid, I've said this before, I know, but for the sake of some of you who are new, I remember being a kid in my church in Old Ocean, Texas. I grew up in Sweeney, Texas, and you couldn't run a successful business back then if you didn't go to one of the churches. You weren't even respectable, and you could never win office. You weren't going to win office. If you're running a campaign and you gave a speech, people are going to be like, where you go to church, mister? Oh, I go over here to this church or that church. In fact, for a long time, you couldn't be Catholic. Kennedy was the first president, that sort of broke that mold. It wasn't okay to be Catholic because that just didn't fit the mold of the America that had formed up prior to then. But you certainly couldn't be agnostic. By no means could you be atheist. You had to be a God-fearing, red-blooded American. Well, it ain't like that anymore. You ain't got to be any of those anymore. That's just where we are. In fact, you are probably fighting more of an uphill battle if your Christianity is front and center to your campaign. You're probably going to fight harder to get elected now than used to. That's fascinating to me. So, the God of this age blinding the minds of unbelievers, that's what that looks like. Nowadays, you talk about being Christian, you get mocked in some really creative ways that the world did not understand before. One of the favorite statements today of the naturalists is, oh, you're one of those guys that believes in a man in the sky. I'm like, yep, I do believe in a man in the sky, and you will too, because you're going to meet him. That's all I know to say. But yeah, I believe in a man in the sky. I do. Call me crazy. Here I am. Sign me up. Because that's what they're trying to do, is make you look crazy. You believe in this unseen thing that nobody else believes in, is the way they're trying to present it. So yeah, the God of this age, blinding the minds of unbelievers. The idea here is he is the God of the age. And of course, in some of your translations, King James there says the God of this world. NASB says world. And that's fair, honestly, but the word here isn't cosmos. The word here is aeon. Aeon is where we get our word eon, and it's ionos here. So it's theos tutu ionos is the word, literally God of this age, eon. And age like world, eon or ion like cosmos, has a literal and a figurative. Literally, it is a span of time. Figuratively, it is the attitude of that span of time. And so it's entirely possible for the word ion and the word cosmos to be used interchangeably in certain places. Certain statements could use either one of those and be making the same point, because both of those can be used figuratively to speak of the way people think around and about us, right? So it's a similar, actually, phrase, but it's a very different word. The God of this age, and again, the idea of the current state, the current thinking, and again, that emphasizes the state of philosophy, the state of, I guess I would say education, but it's not really about education, but the way people are supposed to be thinking. We see that in Galatians 1. Grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ, who gave himself for our sins to rescue us from this present evil age, according to the will of God our Father. Again, that's Poneros Ios, evil age. And the same idea is what we saw above, the idea of the times being of a certain mindset. And cosmos is the same way, the world around you being of a certain mindset. They tend to go hand in hand in their meaning. Next is the evil one. By the way, we just saw the word poneros in Galatians 3, evil age, evil ion. Now we see the evil one. Matthew 6:13, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Y'all recognize that from the Lord's Prayer. John 17, my prayer is not that you take them out of the world, there's your cosmos, but that you protect them from the evil one. Twice we have the evil one. 2 Thessalonians 3, the Lord is faithful, he will strengthen and protect you from the evil one. So Satan as the evil one here is what we're seeing. Evil is the word poneros. We saw that again in Galatians above. And the words for evil that we find both in Greek and Hebrew have a lot of nuance to them. I've talked to you before about kakos and kalos and different words that sometimes you're talking about the evil itself, sometimes you're talking about the intent behind the evil. Know that poneros isn't just about doing evil, it's about being evil. If you are evil in your essence, you're poneros. If you do evil things, you may not be called poneros. You're doing evil things. You're doing wickedness. But to be called poneros means that you are substantively evil and broken. It's a strong word. And so the idea of Satan being the evil one doesn't mean he's the one that does bad things. It means he's the one that is bad. He is broken. He is evil in his nature, in his essence. He's in possession of a character that is evil, corrupt. And it carries the idea, and certainly is true in Satanism. Every time we use the word evil, this may not be true, but it certainly is true of Satan, that there's no good in him. He can't do good. He's corrupted. He's a broken compass. You know, a broken watch is right twice a day. A broken compass, it always points us. I guess if you spin around, it'll be right once a revolution, you know. But he's broken. So Satan is the evil one, is that he is one in whom there is no good. There's no propensity for good. He's contemptible. And so, again, not the one who does evil, the one who is evil is what that name means. Moving on, the anointed cherub. This is a nice name because this is a name, again, that goes back pre-fall. Ezekiel 28, we saw that earlier. You are anointed as guardian cherub. In the King James, you are anointed the cherub that covers. The word covering there is sakak, and it means to put a ring around, to hedge in, or to protect something, like putting a bowl over something that you don't want, like putting Tupperware, you know, our food in Tupperware, sealing it off from the outside. And so that word is the anointed cherub or the guardian cherub. He was anointed as guardian cherub. I put anointed cherub, but guardian cherub probably needs to be in that title there. Anointed, yes, that just means that God consecrated him to be. But the cherub that covers, or the covering cherub, is the idea of him having protective qualities, and along with that are administrative qualities, oversight qualities, boss man sort of qualities. We talked about that earlier. He is the highest order of angel, being a cherub, and he is the highest order of cherub, being the cherub that covers. He's the top. He's the one that protects, the one that guards, and implicitly the one with the most authority, and clearly that has proven to be true. So this is referring to Satan pre-fall. Back to Ezekiel 28, you were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until wickedness was found in you. We went through that last week. Next title is the Prince of Demons. Prince of Demons. This is going back. We covered this also. That is from Matthew 12, is probably the best one. They say it's by Beelzebub, that prince of demons, this fellow drives out demons. This is when Jesus did his messianic miracle. He calls the people in the street to say, could this be the son of David? Which caused the Pharisees to say, no, he's demon-possessed. It's by the prince of demons, this fellow drives out demons, to which Jesus said, if I drive demons out by the power of Satan, by whose power do your people drive them out? Kingdom divided against itself will fall. If Satan drives out Satan, all of that stuff you're familiar with. Then he pronounced the unpardonable sin. All of that is in that text. We talked about this last time, that actually the word is Beelzebub, which is, it's Beelzebub. It's the idea of, or Beelzebub is the Lord of the Flies, but it's referring to Baal. The proper name, Beelzebub, here, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. My notes are wrong. I'm reading it and I'm seeing it. Beelzebub is referring to Baal, but the Jews called it Beelzebub, which is what we see that they referred to Jesus as. That means the Lord of the Flies. And that was a way to mock, frankly, their ancestors for having worshiped Baal. But either of those terms come back from Beelzebub. We talked about that last week. And that emphasizes the prince of demons there in English is the best for us to understand. That's the meaning behind it. And that talks about his authority over all of the angels that rebelled with him. He is their ruler. They followed him. And if you follow someone into battle, he's your ruler. You know, you made that choice, especially one that you can never win and one you can never get out of. There are no white flags. There's no getting out. They're going to follow him to the end. King of Tyre and King of Babylon. We've looked at these two as well, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here. Both of these texts deal with a reference to a literal earthly king. In the case of the king of Tyre, we see in Ezekiel 28 things that are clearly talking to an earthly king. And then all of a sudden we can tell we're no longer talking to an earthly king. We're talking to the power behind the earthly king. That picks up in verse 12. Says, you were the model of perfection, full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. Well, that's not talking about a king anymore, and it goes on. We read all that a couple weeks ago. So part of this text talks to the worldly king. Part of it is talking to the power behind the earthly king, and that is Satan. And so here he's called the king of Tyre, being the evil force behind the literal king's actions. That shows him demonstrating his power through demonic control over that king. King of Babylon, same thing. Talking about a king till we're not talking about a king, then we're talking about the power behind the king. And we see him referenced in Isaiah 14, verse 12. Again, it's the verse 12 where it changes. How you've fallen from heaven, morning star. We saw that a second ago, son of the dawn. Cast down to the earth. So all of this is, both of these are examples of Jesus being given a title that mirrors a human title of someone he has corrupted. I said, did I say Jesus? Satan. My brain's going back and saying, what did he just say? Satan given a title that mirrors the corruption of one of his projects. So the next title then is accuser of the brethren. We see that in Revelation 12, Job, Zechariah. Revelation 12, I heard a loud voice in heaven say, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers, who accuses them before our God night and day, has been hurled down. Well, just before that, we saw there's war in heaven. Michael and his angels were fighting against Satan and his angels and cast them to the earth. That's another story for another time. It's a difficult text because I think in part it's telling us a portrait of world history, and in part it's something that's happening in the real time. But the next word is, he has been hurled down. So we know who it's talking about because it tells us who it's talking about. The devil that leads the whole world astray is in the text. So this is about Satan. And the inference here, and we build this inference from multiple texts, not just this one. We have two more to go. This is the last in the Bible and the last historically written. We get to go back to Zechariah, and we get to go back to Job in that order going backwards to kind of understand this inference. But the inference is that when we sin, Satan stands before God and says, you see what Rick just did? See what I did there? I might have done it too. We're going to talk about Rick right now. You see what he just did? You can't honor this man. You can't help this man to, you see, and that's what Satan does. He's the accuser, and that's the picture. He's the accuser of the brethren. This one is a head scratcher to me because I don't understand what he hopes to gain. I also don't understand God's patience in allowing it. But we see it. We saw it with Peter. Jesus told Peter, Satan has asked to sift you as wheat. And I'm like, well, I can understand wanting to see him fall, but I don't understand him going to God and saying something to God. Now, I'm going to offend half the room right now. All of the females. I'm just preparing you. I'm letting you know. Every man alive feels a certain futility arguing with his wife. Because we think different, and we know we think different, and we know that whatever you think, you're going to think it. We're going to tell you why we think what we think, but we're either going to be mansplaining or we're going to be told we're wrong. It's just, and they make comedy routines about it. Now, I'm not saying this is true. I think this is how we feel. And it's probably because we're so stupid because you're actually right, but that's another story. How do you argue with God is the point. As difficult as arguing with your spouse is, how do you stand before God in whose mind everything is truth, in whose mind truth is defined? You don't know what truth is? It's what God thinks about it. That's the definition of righteousness. It's the definition of truth. It's the definition of existence. How futile could it be for thousands of years to be going in front of God and pointing at poor Rick and saying, you see what he did? But that's the picture. He accuses them before God day and night. Now, I don't think it means that Satan is 24 hours a day, every day of the, perpetually there, because he comes and goes. We know he comes and goes. He tempted Christ directly. He tempts Peter directly. He tempts people directly. But he goes to, apparently, the Father. And we get that from Job originally. We're going now to the oldest text. Job is the oldest account, the oldest written account probably in the Bible. Job lived, we think, around Abraham's time. And around Abraham's time, Moses had not yet written about Abraham. It's happening, but it hadn't been written until Moses. So Job is probably our oldest written text. And Job was a devout man. Satan goes to God. And God says, from where have you come? Satan says what Satan says, from wandering the earth. And God says, have you considered my servant Job? That just kills me. I just want to say, Lord, don't ever mention my name to the devil, please. I have hard enough time dealing with these humans around me. I don't need to fight him just explicitly like that, but that's what God did. And Satan says this, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You've blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. That's what Satan does. That's him accusing the brothers. He's telling God, not his wife, not Mrs. Satan, he's telling God how to think about Job, as if God doesn't know. But he accuses Job of being a phony righteous man. He's only righteous because you've coddled him. You stop coddling him, and I'll have him on my team in no time. Which is fascinating to me that those kind of dialogues happen. We know that happened. We get the inference from Revelation that it happened, and we're about to get another one from Zechariah. We already went through that one some months back. But God allows Satan to test Job, and God allows Satan to come and accuse Job. And he interacts with Satan over these things for reasons I don't understand. Zechariah, our 8 visions. We saw in one of them Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right side to accuse him. The Lord said to Satan, the Lord rebuke you, Satan. The Lord who's chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is not this man a burning stick snatched from the fire? In other words, I've plucked him out of there. And he said to Joshua, I've taken away your sin. I'll put on rich garments on you, put a clean turban on his head. So they did while the angel of the Lord stood by. And he gave his charge to Joshua. If you walk in my ways, keep my requirements, you'll govern my house and give charge of my courts. And I'll give you a place among these standing here. And so all of that to say, this is a long text. We went through all of that earlier in the year. God having ordained for Joshua a plan, but Satan was standing there accusing Joshua. And Joshua, by the way, was standing there in dirty clothes, implicating that there's reason to accuse him. By the way, that's true for all of us. You think Satan's going to have a hard time finding something to accuse God about you? He won't for me. I know that. I think you know it too. But the point was that Satan accuses, God cleans. God snatched him from the fire, cleansed him, put on clean clothes. So we see the accusations of Satan, but they are eliminated by the God who forgives. Jesus eliminates Satan's accusation for the righteous, but we still have that picture of him as the accuser of the brothers. That's one of his titles. The next one is the one who masquerades as angel of light. We get that from 2 Corinthians 11. Satan masquerades as an angel of light. That is not a title so much as a descriptor, but it's clean enough and specific enough that it's worth making the list. That shows him as a deceiver, pretending to be something he's not. It's a title that kind of shows us the I will statements Satan made in Isaiah 14. I will make myself like the Most High. I will ascend to the mountain. I will rise above the stars. All the things that he said there. But he presents himself as righteousness. By the way, that's happening right now. We have politicians right now in the name of Christ arguing for horrible, sinful things. Saying Jesus was, I heard that just today, Jesus was a radical. And I want to grab this little Fruit Loop man and hold him down and say, Jesus was a radical in his righteousness. He was radical because he was so much more righteous than the world around him. You're being a radical in your sin. Let's just get that straight. Yeah, Jesus was radical and you're a radical, but y'all are radical on the complete opposite spectrums of the culture that you're claiming to represent. This radical somehow makes you like Jesus. Sorry. I'm careful not to say his name. Y'all know who I'm talking about, but I'm going to just leave it there. Anybody who claims to be a preacher, who claims to be a theologian and says stuff like that, gets the hairs on the back of my neck all tingly. But that's the angel of light masquerade. This is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do when it's wrong. All right, the tempter. Matthew 4, we see him as the tempter. In that occasion, that was why he's there. He's there to tempt Christ. One of the temptations is, if you're Son of God, tell the stones become bread. We know that. We also see in 1 Thessalonians 3, when I could stand it no longer, I sent to find out about your faith. I was afraid that in some way the tempter might have tempted you and our efforts might have been useless. That is Paul basically fearful of the falling of the faith of those in Thessalonica. But we see that Satan is one who campaigns. He goes about from person to person and he tempts. He wants to cause people to fall. He tempts so that they fall so that he can go and accuse them before the Father is what it seems like. The word tempter is perazon, and it means tempter. Here is the present participle, which means that it's an activity that goes on and on and on. He is a continual tempter. He is the tempter in perpetuity. It's not something he did once, it's what he does. And so the tempter is there. We see warnings that 1 Corinthians, Ephesians, the devil's fiery darts, certainly in Ephesians 6, I think, the full armor of God, so you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. Over and over we see these warnings. James, resist the devil and he'll flee from you. The idea that he's coming after us, coming after. What's he coming after? He wants us to sin. He wants us to fall into sin. And he cannot undo our salvation. But he can make us very ineffective as Christians. If he can keep us sinful, if he can keep us wallowing in a place where we're not serving the Lord, then we're out of commission. We're like an enemy combatant who had his trigger finger shot off. He can't shoot anymore. Don't worry about him anymore. He's fine. Unless he figures out another way to effectively use that rifle of his, they focus their attention on someone else. So he already owns the lost. It is the believers that he wants to fight and tempt to cause us to be ineffective. Next one is the deceiver. We've only got 2 left. 12:9. The dragon hurled down. This is the second part of the text I read earlier, or the previous part of the text I read earlier. Great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, who leads the whole world astray, hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. So again, he is the one who leads the world astray, who deceives the world. So the tempter and the deceiver here, because that's what he does. And in fact, there's no place better than Revelation to illustrate that, because he's literally in the great campaign of deceiving the whole world into believing that his counterfeit son, the Antichrist, is actually the Christ. Job 12, to him belongs strength and victory. Both deceived and deceiver are his. Now that may or may not be speaking specifically of Satan there, but definitely that title kind of fits in line with the angel of light, fits in line with the tempter, fits in line with a lot of these. The idea of him being the one who deceives, the one who tries to get people to fall. And by the way, going back to the evil one, you put all these together, there's nothing left but to call him but evil. This is just evil. This is an entire campaign, an entire lifelong occupation of doing what is evil. Lastly, he's the spirit at work in the disobedient. Back to Ephesians 2. Saw him called that earlier. 2 attributes of Satan really are summed up in that: the spirit at work in the disobedient. He's spirit, he is, and he's at work in the disobedient, the unbelievers. Again, they can work with impunity in those who have not the protection of Christ, because there's no will to resist in the unbeliever. All right, that worked out good as far as our schedule goes. How can we get any questions or comments? We moved through this really rapidly, I know. Angelology is like that. Most of it, as far as doctrine goes, we don't have a whole lot of, here are some ironclad things you need to know about angels. Most of it is we observe and we deduce. It's very deductive. Yes, ma'am. Yes. He owns the unbelievers. But that's what I was saying earlier. God has the power to unblind them. When the gospel is preached, Paul said in Romans 8, 7, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, it's the power of God unto salvation. The idea of the gospel being preached is like a battering ram on that wall. And when the Holy Spirit cracks that open and they see, then they see. We've all experienced it. You hear the gospel. At some point in your life, the gospel is just religious ease. It's just some talk. It's, these people want me to go to their club and wear their shirt. And then all of a sudden, it's light and it's power. The power of God unto salvation. When God speaks, Satan's got no power to stop that. But in the unbeliever, yes. He has the ability to make it sound like rubbish. That's why they say that we have private conversations with our imaginary friend in the sky. They say those kind of things about us. That's what Christians are to them. We're stupid. Stupid, gullible people who talk to the man in the air. I think there's a nuance to all of them. The idea of him being a power, the idea of him being deceptive, the idea of him being evil, the idea of him being an adversary, an accuser, those are all different aspects of the complexity of what he is. So, Jesus has more names than that, the Lamb, the Lion, the Son of God, all the things names of Christ. I think it just gives us a breadth. But I think you made the point too. Because there are 40 authors writing, and he is a constant all through the Scripture. If they refer to him at all, what are the odds 40 different people are going to refer to something the same way? And so we're seeing maybe even windows, perspectives of their thinking in the titles that they give him when they write. But interesting.
Do you think some of those names might have been more common
at their time. Possible. I don't want to say that. I don't want to say I think that, because that implies that I think that that's valid. I don't think it's invalid, but I don't think it's valid. I think it's plausible. And I try to be real careful about those kind. You know that. But I think it's plausible. All right, we're going to turn it over to our formerly accused brother to lead us in our prayer time. Oh, it's streaming, brother. It's on the internet now.